Tibetan Buddhism is a tradition that grew in Tibet, blending the Buddhist teachings with Tibetan meditation, rituals, and culture.
Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum.
This is a sacred and widely used mantra in Tibetan Buddhism. The mantra consists of 6 powerful syllables, each holding deep spiritual symbolism. O Mani Padme Hum. Om representing the sacred sound of the universe. It's said to purify the ego and represent the practitioner's body, speech, and mind. Mani translating to jewel, symbolizing intention to be compassionate, loving, and enlightened. Padme translating to lotus. This represents wisdom, like a lotus that blooms beautifully out of muddy water. Wisdom arises from life's struggles. And lastly, Hum, that represents the invisible unity of compassion, Mani, and wisdom, Padme. It's the power to transform the mind into that of a Buddha. In Tibetan Buddhism, repeating mantras similar to this acts as sort of a mind protection to shield practitioners from negative thoughts, purify karma, and overall reshape the mind's energetic state. The ultimate goal of Tibetan Buddhism is enlightenment, or Buddhahood, the total liberation from suffering and the cycle of rebirth, coupled with the realization of ultimate wisdom. To achieve this, practitioners balance personal spiritual growth with the compassionate intention to alleviate suffering for all sentient beings. The core goals are the desire to attain enlightenment, not just for yourself, but to help all other beings escaped. Second, using specialized yoga techniques, mantras, and meditations to rapidly accelerate the path to Buddhahood within just one lifetime. And lastly, gaining a direct, experimental understanding that all things exist interdependently. Rather than having a fixed, independent identities, everything depends on everything else. The Noble Eightfold Path is a key part of the Four Noble Truths. This wheel outlines the way to end suffering. The path emphasizes ethical living, meditation, and developing wisdom. Following the path generates good karma, leading to positive consequences and preventing suffering. The 8 interconnected elements of the path are the right view, the right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and the right concentration. This path encourages us to cultivate skillful behaviors to overcome hindrances and achieve a state of peaceful awareness through meditation. The relationship between Tibet and China has been complicated for centuries, but the modern conflict really began in 1950 when the newly formed Chinese Communist Party sent troops to Tibet and took the control of the region. China argued that Tibet had historically been a part of China, while Tibetans saw themselves as an independent nation with their own government, culture, and religion. After the invasion, Tibetans' leaders were pressured into signing the 1951 17-point agreement, which recognized Chinese rule but promised to protect Tibetan autonomy and religious freedom. Those promises were not kept, and tensions grew. In 1959, a major uprising broke out in Lhasa, which was violently suppressed, and the Dalai Lama fled to exile in India. Since then, Tibet has been ruled by China, and the conflict has shifted from military control to cultural and political control. Today, the Chinese government imposes strict limits on Tibetan religion, language, movements, and expression. Reports describe heavy surveillance restrictions on Buddhist practices and policies aimed at silencing Tibetan culture, essentially pushing Tibetans to adopt Han Chinese identity. Tibetan communities and the government in exile argue that this amounts to cultural repression, or even cultural genocide. Protests, both inside Tibet and globally, continue, but China maintains tight control and treats the issue as an internal matter. One of the biggest human rights concerns in Tibet involves Tibetan children being taken away from their families and placed into state-run boarding schools. These schools are run by Chinese government, and reports say that more than 1 million Tibetan kids have been moved into them. Children are separated from their families, sometimes sent far away, and parents often have little to no control. In these schools, kids are taught mainly in Mandarin instead of Tibetan, and they grow up with limited access to their own language, religion, and culture. Human rights groups argue that this is a form of cultural erasure because it breaks the connection between Tibetan children and their communities. China denies this and says that schools are meant to improve education. His Honor Jigdal Dachkhen Sakya, head Lama of Sakya Monastery of Tibetan Buddhism in Seattle. Dagchen and his family were forced to flee Tibet in 1959. 1 year later, they came to the United States, making Dagchen one of the first lamas to bring Tibetan Buddhism to the West. In 1984, Dagchen established Sakya Monastery in Seattle to preserve and share Tibetan Buddhist culture and religion.
So the two purposes which is establishing this monastery here. The main purpose was, as is clear to all people, due to the political change in the political climate in Tibet, we had to leave our country and to bring our tradition and culture to the West. And so it was important to preserve that culture and tradition, especially of the Kun lineage. So it's for the preservation of the Kun lineage as well as the Sakya tradition.
Today, the Sakya Monastery has been kept alive through gentle restoration and the love of volunteers who help protect its ancient texts and artwork. Thanks to their care, the monastery still stands as a quiet treasure of Tibetan history, holding centuries of wisdom that continue to shine today.